we're going to go through a bunch of research. It's when you do community branding research, you get a lot. Most of you all participated in it. It's why you're here. Whether it was a one-on-one interview or some groups, there were some surveys and there are other things that were done. We ask a lot of similar questions. It's amazing how one small difference in the way you ask a question will elicit a completely different response. But what always comes out of this, the goal of this is that, one question doesn't tell us who we are. Collective, because we all have different perspectives, depending on what we do in the community and what our role is and how new we are to the community, how long we've lived here, roots, all that stuff. And so we're affected, our perspective is different. This research was meant to be collectively, you're going to hear, and once you see all the research, once you're exposed to it, it's kind of obvious. Because it wasn't about one person going, by golly, West Fargo is about this. And this is, let me tell you, this is what it is. Although they may or may not be right, that's one person. And we wanted everyone's input, right? And so when you get to the end of these, the goal is never, ta-da, a magic rabbit out of the hat. That's never the goal. If it's a complete surprise, it's wrong. Does that make sense? Don't you, right? The challenge isn't whether you know the story of West Fargo. It's that you probably know too much and you're unable to tell the story effectively because you have all the baggage, all the stuff, all the everything. And so you try to say everything with everything that you say instead of being bold and strong about really what makes you West Fargo. And so this is about wiping away the clutter so you can be bold with how you speak. So that's usually what's going to happen, just letting you know in advance, okay? Let's roll with it. It was interesting. Many years ago, there was a photo documentary done, a book. I don't know if you all have seen it. It's called West Fargo, A Work in Progress. That was before a City on the Grow, actually. You're a work in progress. One of your community leaders at the time said, West Fargo needs to decide what it wants to be when it grows up. Well, did you? You did. Congratulations, right? That led to there were some transitions, some changes going on in the industry, particularly meatpacking industry. Things were changing. A lot of the agrarian life that really defined much of the beginnings of Haggart and Riverside and all the different names you've had. There was a lot of transition going on. Your leadership saw that. You all saw that as a community, and you realized we have to be ready now. We have to put a plan in place what's going to happen for the next 20, 30 years. You did that. The leadership did that. And it kind of led to what you've seen the last 15 years. You've doubled in population. It's become an incredible place to live. You're not the same personality of a place now as you were 30, 40 years ago, right? There's been a lot of change, right? You were maybe considered just a rural little farm town on the outskirts of Fargo. No one would define you that way today, would they? But they did 30, 40 years ago, right? A city on the grow, you have been. And I think what you're going to see with this research, what we heard from you all is mission accomplished. Yes, we have been, but we're still going to continue to grow. But let's make sure we don't lose what's important to us, the charm that's important, our small town values, our character of our community, our connectivity with one another. That's super important to this community. So as we continue to grow, let's don't just focus on growing anymore. No one's resentful that you all did that, but let's make sure we preserve our character too. It's time for that. It's time for the next chapter. That's basically what we learned. There you go. So if you get called and you have to leave suddenly, you already know the answer of everything we're going. Okay? Does that work? All right. Good deal. So today's presentation, we're gonna show you basically everything we learned in the research. You're gonna see it as well, minus the verbatims. There's like 1,600 people commented on things. I'm not gonna show you all those, but we went through them. If you want to see them, come talk to me. We're gonna find out what West Fargo says about West Fargo. What do others? We went in a 75-mile radius outside of West Fargo. See what your neighbors said about you. So we'll find out what your reputation is there, right? We're doing this for really community brand identity that builds our personality. It differentiates us from other places in North Dakota and anyone that we would compete with from a business development standpoint. Community pride is an important part of this project as well. We have to have something that we all rally behind, that we all care about. This is all of our community. It's not just the city of West Fargo's brand. It's everybody's, really, right? And so we want to make sure we encourage community pride with this. We do want some standard applications, some consistencies that typically go with branding are part of this project as well, right? We want to make sure that when we speak, it reflects who we are and it's recognizable. There's ownership, although the typical rules of branding apply. So all those things of what we're doing. Quick little recap: over 1,900 people participated in this research. So it's not what the guy that talks funny from Tennessee says. It is about what you all said, and your peers in the community, and others, your neighbors outside the community. There's truth to that. So over 1,900 people participated in one way, shape, or form, whether it's a community survey, focus groups, and interviews. We walked in and out of shops like Thunder Coffee and talking to them, and they don't know who we are. We're just like any other guest and asking what's going on, right? Is Thunder Coffee here or something? Everybody looked over there. Oh, there we go. Great. Okay, go. Great place. Love it. Sure could use some right now. Yeah, so there's a lot of people that participated, and I think that's super, super important. That's par for the course, I think, for this community. Community engagement and involvement is a priority, and no difference with this project at all. So I'll let our director of research kind of roll us through things. Make notes, because we have a time obligation to you, we can't take questions during this. If there's something that just absolutely needs clarification, we'll do that. But to go deep into one thing, we just, afterwards, if you have any questions, we'll gladly we'll answer that, okay? We're glad to be here, thank you.
Yeah, yep. As we get started, a couple things. As the slide showed, over 1,900 participants. I think it's worth noting to this group, over 1,600 of those were people, residents of West Fargo. That's phenomenal. And Melissa and her team did a great job of pushing this out to get participation, and that speaks volumes to the connectivity of the citizens to what we're trying to do. And so as we talk about differentiating, last night I did a real quick question to the lady at the hotel. I said, "And what city am I in right now?" And she said, we were at the DoubleTree, and she said, "You're in Fargo." So there's that differentiation. You want to be your own place. This West Fargo wants to be, you just don't want to be the suburb. So as we go through this, as we begin, that begins to unfold itself, and this brand begins to say, we are West Fargo. We're not the west side of Fargo. So as we go through and looking at this, but there's three distinct groups. There's the stakeholders, which is a lot of you, most of you. There are the citizens, and then there's outside. So that we're going to look at those three groups, and then we'll get into a digital audit that Steve will come and do to look at what you look like online as people begin to look. So let's look at what you said as the end market. So the key observations that we have, these are from stakeholders. One, without a doubt, you've grown significantly. Two is that small hometown feel in schools and the quality of life is the most important aspects of people, why people are here. There's a reason why you live here, and why the citizens live here and choose to live here. There's a lot of things that go on, but that quality of life in the schools are big. The current leadership and the desire to move the community forward is what makes West Fargo exceptional. We've seen this quite a bit because there's two entities involved. There is the City of West Fargo as a place, and then there is the City of West Fargo as leadership and an entity. So there's two different groups of people, but they both share kind of the same name, the city. So we have to look at that, and we ask some questions specifically about the leadership, and it's viewed very highly. And then the other observation for the end market and those stakeholders is the sense of West Fargo has grown so much that it may be hard to maintain the aspects. The community has made it so great. You'll hear a lot over the next few minutes about small town feel and what that looks like. And that's, as you grow, sometimes you lose that. But the key is for us to be able to keep that, because that's what people love about this place. So as it grows, we have to be conscious of that. So let's look at some of this. West Fargo describes itself as a small town that's growing. We are a small town. Size-wise and land mass, we are a small town, but we're growing, but we want to keep those values. There. Also, it has a positive, friendly, small-town reputation, but sometimes those special assessments tend to overshadow that a little bit. So we have this great thing, but we know that as we grow, we have to pay for things, and there has to be some things that happen to be able to do that, but that tends to overshadow that just a little bit when it comes to what our reputation is. People see that. And then what makes us prominent? We ask them questions about what makes us prominent, what do people love. But when we say what makes us prominent is the school systems, without a doubt, the schools make us prominent. Whether it's education or sports, whatever that is one thing that's great. And I will say that in most communities, we can ask one question and determine kind of the feel of the community, and that is tell us about your schools. If schools do well, communities tend to do well. When schools struggle, communities tend to struggle. And your West Fargo does really well, and their schools are very well known, both inside and out with that. So we look at that, you know, we've got the second largest school district, but that growth, the school system, the growth, and that sense of pride really is what makes you prominent from the inside. Then what do people love about West Fargo? Oh, wow. There's a difference between how we describe it and what we really love, and the small town feel in the schools are what people love. Again, you live here for a reason, and everybody has a different definition of what a small town is. And what the key is, as we grow, how do we keep whatever that is there, and we don't become a big city like our neighbor. And so as we look at this, that's what people love is that hometown feel. You know, it's the school district. We're just a great place to live. We have great services in police and fire, so we're safe. That's what people feel in doing this. Also, there's a couple of attractions that people love in. That's the lights and the yards. That's becoming our downtown. There are some things that people love with that, and as those develop, we think that's very important.
I just want to stop and say
Oh.
we will make this available after the meeting, so for those of you who are squinting and trying to you can just get lost in Greg's words, and we'll make it available afterwards for you guys to really look and take a look at the words. So
Yep.
listen to Greg.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. Like Steve said, we went through, paid 1,900 different responses plus on each of these to determine kind of where we stand. So we will provide that in the reports as well. But what makes us authentic? It's kind of like what gives us that. What do we do and deliver very well? And small town feel, we do the community, the schools, also that family feel. There's a lot of things going on with families. I will say that as we were driving around doing our in-market, it's very few places that we go into where you go by elementary school and there's hundreds of bicycles. That tells us a lot about the community, that it's safe enough for our kids to ride their elementary school kids to ride their bikes to school. That speaks volumes to that quality of life and what it is for a small town. But that sense of community is very strong here. Then we ask about the character, and that is hardworking, friendly people, and we're focused on that sense of community. We're in this together as a community, but we're hardworking, and that's what gives us that character, and it kind of goes back to the history. We think it's very important when you look at the history of where we've come from to where we are today, but that hardworking, it's a little bit of a blue-collar kind of mentality, hardworking, and there's an ag background for sure in this. But when we look at that, that's what gives us our character. And then what makes us exceptional? That's one of the things that kind of puts you over the top. And these are stakeholders, so they tend to brag just a little bit more compared to the community. But what makes us exceptional is the leadership. We have good leadership compared to those around us, and the desire to move the community forward. When you look at City on the Grow, you've done a great job. Congratulations. And so now we're in that next chapter is where do we go? Because we've grown and people have seen that, now what? As we go forward. So moving the community forward is what makes us exceptional. We've done a good job of that. And then what makes us uniquely interesting compared to Fargo? It's always important to kind of compare yourself to somebody else, but what makes us unique? And we have that small town culture and that hardworking value and the strong work ethic. One of the things that kind of popped up is, you know what, we're a bit grittier. We kind of get in there and work hard and be a part of that compared to our neighbor. And so that's really important, and those values that go along with the hardworking work ethics. So then we ask this is one of the things that is where people brag about their community. And that's where we need to pay close attention is, what's the most popular activity one must do to have a true West Fargo experience? So when you think about that, somebody coming in, what do you tell them to do? What are they going to do? And it comes to schools is watching the Packers play the Mustangs, the two big schools. You know, to have a true experience, you need to go see that. Also, the hockey and visit the yards of the lights. But what happens is when you look at this, there's not one big thing that people say, oh, to have this true experience, this is what you need to do. So there's not one specific thing. There's some other small things that are out there. But when you look at that is, what do we have? What do we tell people to do, and where do we go with that? But when you look at this, it goes back to those local sporting events. That goes back to that community pride, and that's what stakeholders are saying that is the most popular activity to do. And then we ask the most iconic visual. We ask this in most places to find out where people would send us to have that one picture in that most iconic moment. And there's no real true iconic visual. There's some things that are listed here, but there's not this one big thing that says you need to go have your picture made here or you must see this. There's a number of different small things according to stakeholders, which is not a bad thing, but again, it doesn't set us apart from anyone as we look through this. But you've got the diversion and some of the new developments that are there. You also have Cheyenne Street, which is the old, they classify, obviously as the old Main Street. Now, what do we do best? What do we do really well? City employees believe that West Fargo delivers great service. No question about it. It has been mentioned multiple times of the great police service, the great fire service. Anybody from the garbage department in here? That's been mentioned that you do a great job in that, which says that you're a clean place. You're a safe place, especially when police and fire services get in there. When they say we do those very well, that goes back to that quality of life. There's a reason I live here because I'm safe. My kids can ride their bike to school. There's a reason for that. And when you look at all the other city services that are in there, it says there's something that speaks volumes about the city that we take care of it, that we're doing that. So you do a great job in that. So what's our reputation? The reputation that we feel, these are stakeholders, you feel, is that we're a growing place and a growing suburb of Fargo. It's true. It's true. You are a suburb of Fargo, but you're the city of West Fargo. You get lumped in that we're a part of Fargo. We want to be our own city. And so that reputation is, you know what? We're growing, what you're doing that. There's continued on that plan that you have set forth, and that's the reputation, and we'll see that gets confirmed in a few minutes. But we look at the city on the grow. It's been accurate. I don't think there's anything we need to say about that any further, but it has been, you've done a very good job of that, managing that growth and continuing to do that and offering some exciting things. So that was the stakeholders, you in this room. Then we went to the city, the residents of the city. This is their city. And so it's important in our research that we understand what they have to say. So we sent this out via email and a couple of other options that they had to participate, and had over 1,600 people. So the main observations that we have is, one is West Fargo has a positive reputation. That's great. Citizens believe that. That you have a positive reputation. They also feel it's a great place to live and start a business, and a pretty good place to visit. So there's a difference. A place to live, they've rated high, place to start a business, but then it's just a pretty good place to visit. Goes back to kind of not a lot to do here. So when you look at visiting, everybody kind of pushes you to the city, I guess to the east. And then the city of West Fargo is friendly, family-oriented, charming community that's growing. The schools in proximity to Fargo and the interstates are the most notable assets. We'll talk about those here in just a minute. And the residents feel really good about local government. I'm just going to tell you that that's a good thing as you move this forward, because the government is the one that's pushing this. So there's some faith that residents have in who's doing this. So when we look at this particular chart, there's 3 areas: place to live, start a business, and place to visit. If you look at this, where a 3 is average. So look at it this way. If you owned a restaurant and you were known for your hamburgers, and they asked someone, well, tell me about the hamburger you had at Steve's place. And they go, yeah, it was okay. Would you want that? Probably not. You'd want, oh, it's exceptional, it's very good. That's what you would want. That very good and exceptional is the 4 and 5. That's where people begin to brag. So when you look at this as a place to live, it goes back to that quality of life that we were talking about. That place to live is rated between a 4 and a 5 at 4.35. You look at a place to start a business just at 4, and then a place to visit is a little bit lower. So when we look at that, it's more about the quality of life than it is people coming here to visit. We're not bragging about that as much. And then we ask this word cloud here, the words that are large are the words that were mentioned the most. And Phil, you know what? The 2 to 3 words that best describe us are, it's a growing, family-friendly place, and it's safe. Those are great things. Believe me, we've seen some communities that that's not the case that we've worked with. But that's good. It's a family-friendly place, safe, and again, we're growing because that was our mission. And then we ask, besides the people, the reason we preface that is everybody has great people, or at least they say they do. Every community we work with say, oh, people. So if we did that, it would be people, people, people. But what makes us more appealing than other cities in the area? That small town feel and good schools is what sets us apart from those in the other areas. We're known for that, the good schools and that small town feel. Again, you got to remember that as we grow, that's what people like. So you have to maintain that. And also growing gets busy a little bit. But the residents feel we have a positive reputation. As you look at this is very important because, how do you think residents in neighboring communities perceive us? That 84% say they perceive us in a positive way. And that's a good thing. That means that they like who they are, who we are. It's a matter of talking about who we are and selling ourselves and really bragging about ourselves. And then what are the most notable assets? The schools and the location are the most notable assets that positively shape who we are today. Our school system, when you begin to look at this, there's a number of things, but the schools and our location is one of those things that it's not brag worthy in kind of who we are. It's just a place and a spot holder really of a location along the interstate. So when we look at what's our most notable assets, there's nothing that really sticks out besides the schools, with the exception of location and proximity that's there. When you look at some things that we're doing, the yards in Cheyenne, that's a little bit lower, but as that grows, that becomes more notable as well. Quality of life ratings. Again, this goes back to the key things of why people live here. Really important as to why people live here. These are all rated really well. And so you look at access to the larger metro area. I live here because I had this sense of place and this small town feel. But if I need something in a larger city, I'm close enough to that to be able to get it. So that's very important. The quality schools and the safety, those are all rated extremely high in this. Then we look at heritage. This is one of the areas that the others were high. We have a great history here. West Fargo has a great history and a great history to tell. And what this says to us is we need to do a better job of telling our history. The only place that we've found to find the history is right over here on this mural on the wall. But there's a lot of things that we could do. We need to be able to tell that history and preserve it and have opportunities to learn what it is. I did a focus group with high school and middle school students during this, which was fantastic. You have some great students. But I did that. It was amazing at the amount of history that some of them knew. What was funny is one of the meetings that I was in, they were like, wow, I didn't know that, and the kids knew that. But there's some of that to tell, and they were excited about it. It wasn't like that they pushed it back. They were like, oh, we've got some cool history here. And we were asking about the name of the Packers. How'd that come about? And they were able to tell us what that was. So I think that was really important. But this is a heritage area, would be one of those areas that says, this is an area for us to work on. And as a brand performance indicator is, at the end of the day, did we move the needle here on this? And I think that's very important. And so as we look at visitation entertainment, remember visitation was rated low. As we look at that, we're not really promoters. The citizens of West Fargo are not really promoters in what we have. So when you look at this and how they evaluate it and rate it, nothing really except, the sense of community really stands out. That's the highest rated one, but nothing gets us in that mid 4 to 5 that says we do that really, really well. So I think that's important. And then the small town feel and the lights are what makes us unique. When we look at what makes us unique that's not found in any other city is that small town, the lights make us unique. If you look, what makes us unique are people. Apparently our people say that we're different than the people in Fargo, which is probably true. But that's where we get into that division. But what makes you unique is that small town and the lights. And then what are the biggest challenges we have here is that keep it from being the higher cost. As we grow, it's got to be paid for, but as we grow, what does that do? So, one of the things that happens is that could be the biggest challenge that we have to keep this small, the atmosphere that we currently have. Affordable housing and that cost of living. And then we ask about the city on the grow, and I think we said enough about that. It is a city on the grow. We're bigger and better. We're continuing to grow, and we're still, respondents say we're still growing. So we look at the 5 senses. I'm going to go through these fairly quick, but it's very important. You think about places that you visited. The chances are you're going to describe one of those based on a place that you've, something you experienced, something that you saw, something that you ate, a feeling that you received there, good or bad. So we look at that, and we look at these 5 senses. And there's a lot of things that are here, but there's not a lot of really big things as you think about this. But what should somebody see? It's the lights, key piece. A lot of people said, you know what? I really don't know what to show them to have a unique experience. Speaks volumes of bragging about ourselves. But you look at that. Bonanzaville kept coming up. We know it's right outside, but it's listed. It's listed on TripAdvisor as the #1 attraction for West Fargo. Then what are the sounds? Activity says there's some things going on. It's bustling, busy cars, traffic. Then it gets into children playing. That speaks a lot about the volume, that small town feel and the quality of life and around kids. And then there's some activity with music and those types of things. What's that emotional? What is the feeling here? And again, it goes back to active and busy. Those are growing pains, if you will. That's what happens there. And then we look at, what are the flavors? It's interesting. Sandy's Donuts comes up. Obviously, that's here. It's one of those things. It's known in Fargo as well. But that's one of those unique flavors here. That's the hometown flavor of what we have. Spitfire. There's some other restaurants that come up in there. So when you look at that, these are things that people do. Top 2 things people do when they visit a place is they shop and they eat, period. So if we have these great things, these are opportunities for us to tell the story of who we are through this. There could be some signature dishes or something like that. So when people come in, they go, oh, wow, that tells the story of who we are. And that's why the senses are so important. And then the fragrant, we have fresh, clean air, and everybody kind of chuckles with this. And, with the Sandy's Donuts, and then we've got some things that are not so pleasant that are here. But when you look at the fragrance, there's a multiple things, a lot of outdoor, and then, we do get a number of the, I really don't know, which says we're not there. This is an important slide that I think that we all need to keep in mind. As you look at this, remember, this is the community, the citizens of our city. We asked the question about how important it is to create and manage our reputation. And you look at 84% said it's important. Okay, that's a key figure as we look forward, because we're doing this as the city, and we're doing this. That's very important to remember. Your citizens want that as well. 54% of them say it's extremely important. And then this particular slide right here, if you can see it, but it rates our leadership, our current leadership, which is in the room. I'm glad this is positive because they're in the room. We do get to deliver this to those when it's in a negative light. But you're viewed as open-minded, fast-paced, looking into the future, approachable, proactive, physically responsible, and effective. Those are positive things for the leadership as you move forward, which is great news. We've had to deliver this, in fact, a couple of weeks ago to a place that was not so great. But that's how the community looks at that. And you got to remember, this is a city-wide brand. So that if those numbers speak volumes, is because people trust them. So the AEP, and I'll move through this pretty quick. The AEP, again, as Steve said, we took the center of West Fargo and we went out 75 miles and drew a radius. So anybody that was in West Fargo was omitted from that. Everybody else was a part of it. So what they saw is, you know, outsiders view you as growing. They know that. Shopping is rated high in West Fargo. We believe that that's because of Costco, because they connect that. And also West Acres Mall gets connected with you. I know it's right on the line, but it does get connected when they begin to think of shopping, because you get off at the West Fargo exit and there it is. And so the proximity in the interstate is what's most appealing, so people can get in and out fairly quickly. So what's the first thing that comes to mind when we ask about West Fargo? And that is, you know what, it's shopping and growth. Those are the top two things. And again, the West Acres Mall gets included in that, but I still think shopping gets associated with who you are. Costco is a big part of that. 2 to 3 words to describe. These are outsiders. How am I going to describe West Fargo? And that is, you know what, it's a growing, nice, busy city. So you may have gone from this sleepy little town in city to now you're kind of in this busy because growth happens and you've got a lot of things going on and interstate going up, and they see that what that new growth is. Then 91% of the folks that we talk to on the outside have either driven through or come and visited here. Not uncommon because of where you're located. So they're driving through here. So they do know who you are. And that's important. If that number had been opposite, we had to drill down to find out why people are not coming. But most people in the region know who you are, and they're driving through here because they see what you have on the interstate. So those who had visited, we asked the question of what they do. What was the main reason for their visit? And if you look, the main reason for their visit is shopping and to eat at a local restaurant. Remember what I said, top 2 things people do when they visit a place is eat and shop. So if you look at that as you grow and you begin to look at what we have, those 2 things also service who we are, service our citizens, but they also service those on the outside as well. And visiting family and friends. Visiting family and friends is really the number 1 reason people visit places, but then the other 2 usually happen. So once they visited, we asked, did it change their perception of who we are? For the most part, their perception didn't change. So they knew who we were. Their perception didn't change here. But if it did, it changed in a positive way. And I think that's a good thing. And if you look at what the positive was, is shopping and restaurants. And it says, you know, many of the old rundown sections of downtown are modern and new and vibrant businesses. So there's some change going on that says we're growing, but we're taking the character of what we had to make it into something new. There's also, you know, they're always building and adding places to visit and shop. Always an exciting place. This is what outsiders are saying about us, and that's really good. The negatives, you got to remember there was only a small portion of those, but what those negatives are is now that they've grown, man, there's too many people here. It seems old and tired, so that, you know, where they're going. So those were the negative pieces. You kind of can probably pick out where they might have visited while they were here to say that. And then crime rate appears to be going up. One of the things that happens with that sometimes when you're close to a big city and you have the same name in your name, you get lumped in there together. So that's probably a big thing that happens with that is when you look at crime, because I got a lot of police officers in here, a lot of times you get lumped into that. We know ours is pretty good, but we get lumped into what Fargo does. So the proximity to Fargo, we ask, you know, what is it that's the most distinguishable asset? The top 2 things are proximity to Fargo and the 2 interstates. And the diversion is a big piece of, you know, what makes us distinguishable. But those 2, when you look at what the proximities, that's a place on the map that says who we are. There's not this big thing that really makes us distinguishable compared to other places. And then what makes us distinct is that we're growing, a good place for business, but a key piece here that a lot of people on the outside, when they look at this, is nothing. They really don't know what makes us distinct from other communities. They kind of know who we are, but we don't have that one thing or 2 or 3 things that really stand out in that. And then as we look at reputation, These are the outsiders. We ask, what's the reputation to those who live outside? More than half the responses said, man, you have a positive reputation. That's good that we have a positive reputation. That means that we're doing something right as we go forward. So the positive, negative, and then a third of those people, they said they probably really don't know much about West Fargo, which is probably true because of who we are. But when you look at that, if they do know of a reputation, it is a positive reputation. Those who don't know about us, that's our job, is to move that needle to where everybody knows about us. And then what's the most interesting thing you know about West Fargo is that it's growing in the Lights District. The Lights District is one of those pieces that's unique. As we go forward, that's what people were known for. They also talk about the fairgrounds. Again, Bonanzaville gets lumped in there. The outsiders are lumping that in with West Fargo, and also our good schools. The top characteristics, when you look at this from outsiders, they rated us a little bit higher. Accessibility is number one. Remember, they talked about proximity. Accessibility is the number one, an attractive place for business. And then, as we go, everything else is kind of below where we want it to be. Then we ask about the visitation. Remember, people coming in to visit and where we rated it. Again, this is one of those that performance indicator that says as we grow and give people the opportunity to come visit, we want them to come spend their money and then go back home. But when you look at this, there's not really a lot of things that outsiders see as that rate really high in this. But you look at the top one, it's, there's some casual dining options and some activities for families. But everything else is an area for improvement for sure. Actually, all of them are. And then we ask about the level of kind of liveliness and vibrancy of West Fargo. And you look at this, and it would be classified as we're not really lively in this. And I think everybody in the room would probably go, you're probably right. When you look at all the ratings that were there, it's close, but this is an opportunity to make us more vibrant and more lively to those around us. And then the digital audit, as we look at this, I'll go. So there's a couple of things. Digital audit, the reason we do that is people who are looking to move here or move a business here, they're looking to see what you look like online before they ever step foot in here. And that's a key piece that we need to remember, because we have to look at that. First of all, City does a great job at creating and following consistency of brand identity, and it's clear when the City of West Fargo is speaking. Melissa and her staff do a fantastic job of communicating. I will say that in all, I've worked with almost 160 communities. I've never had a communications department, a lot of them don't even have them, but a communications department that speaks as loud as they do. And when they speak. So they do a great job in that. And when the city is speaking. So that's very important. It's obvious through this research. And they're active on Facebook, but we really don't have much of a Instagram presence. Won't go into all that. Google search shows up. West Fargo gets confused with Wells Fargo. When you begin to do Google search, that comes up quite a bit. And
it's the number one thing. It's not quite a bit.
Yeah.
Most common, there's a big difference in comes up a little bit. It's the number one thing people inadvertently search for West Fargo. They meant Wells Fargo, and they accidentally typed in West Fargo. They're looking for the bank, right? We joked when we got off the plane because there's an ATM machine. I'm like, hey, look, there's Wells Fargo. Found it. But that tells you people we have a confusing name. Don't worry, we're not going to change it again. We're not doing that. But we have a confusing name, right? Like, we share a name with someone else. I'll finish this out since I'm yapping. I think that means, is that tag team? Is that what that was? All right, good deal. And then there's this, the most common Google question. You know how Google works, right? Like you probably don't do it. We do it for a living. We Google city names, and Google knows that if you're typing for a city name, you're doing some intel on it, and so it automatically generates the top questions people. You can do it with any city. What are the top questions? You know what your top questions are? If you can read this, the top questions related to West Fargo on Google: is it safe? Why does it smell? What is it known for? If I could have jumped in there and said, but you don't understand, we have a big plan for the lagoons, right? Right? Then I would have done that, but I can't. But yeah, that tells you what people are searching for there. Also, I think this is important because as you all go through some changes, you're really proud of a lot of the stuff that you're doing. You should be. The district, I think, is one of those things. You've got some representation here of the district, right? Oh, excuse me. The yards. I meant the yards. The yards. You got the lights and the yards. Okay, I got it. And I just want to encourage you something, and that is the value of the word downtown. Downtown is a strong brand. If a place has a downtown, I've never been there, but I have expectations. It has culture. It has restaurants. It has shops. It has density. It is a reflection of the heritage of that community. Any downtown I've ever been to has that. That's valuable equity. So I just want to encourage you, particularly, you notice I'm leaning towards more of the yards than I am the new shiny lights, which are awesome. I was there last night. But when you don't abandon the word downtown, it's valuable. It's just super valuable, okay? Get it? Everybody get it? You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying, I love the name the yards. I think it's super cool. Don't forget downtown, right? It creates an expectation. There's when you Google downtown West Fargo, because I want to Google down. If I'm going to visit, there's got to be a downtown. Why? Because of all the things I just said. It takes you to Fargo. You don't exist. There is no downtown West Fargo, and and that's an opportunist. That's an opportunity, is the way I see it. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, cool. Wikipedia, super important because it's the number one thing you're going to see when you Google a city name. You're going to get a little map of the city and a little description of it. It pulls it straight from Wikipedia. Every city in the country, that's what it does. All right. We can affect what's listed there for Wikipedia. Go look at ours. It's kind of nondescript. Like, we can affect that. What's the point? Look back at what people think. The number one way people described us is it's near Fargo. That's the number one way people are describing us. And we kind of do it too. It's near Fargo and by the interstate. Great. Now it's time to move to the next show. We need to stand for something. We need to have our personality and our characteristic. And perhaps what we've learned is you've worked hard and successfully created your brand identity. I know when West Fargo, the city, speaks, I see the green and the logo, and I think y'all do a good job with it, like a really good job with it. Like you get the brand identity part of it. What we as a community, all of us, need to focus on is the story part. We've got a great story. Heritage stands out a lot. You saw the ratings. You score. Our heritage isn't really seen much, according to the community. We don't really see much about it, right? We don't really have a story to tell. What? Listen, we're going to continue to grow. We just will. We've done too much. It doesn't stop, right? We've got ourselves in the position where we want to be. But what we learned from the research is that we want to maintain what you all think is important, and that is our personal touch, our connectivity in the community. This small town feel that you heard all over and over and over. What is really a small town feel? Going through the research, it means that we know one another, we help one another. Our kids can ride their bikes to school. I know you might take it for granted. Trust us, not many communities do that, right? It's just a way you live here, and you're proud of it. And so that's what needs to be maintained as we grow. That's what we've got to figure out. How do we do that? And there's not one answer to do that, by the way, but that's what we've got to figure out. I don't think I'm going to go through all these. Yeah, like, by the way, you know, on TripAdvisor is the number one travel website in the country. Like 30 million people use it. It's how people get around, okay? The number one thing to do is Bonanzaville. Now, I think it's probably pretty cool, but you all didn't tell us much about it. You all don't brag about it, if it's that great. Yet it's the number one thing to do, right? Is Bonanzaville. Then I've got Roostow's Recreation Center, Flatland Brewery, Red River, and a Fargo escape room. There you go. There's the top things to do on TripAdvisor, right? You all love you some Sandy's Donuts. I still haven't been there yet. I'm sorry. I got to go check them out, right? I don't want to get too much about brand identity stuff right now. We'll all become creative directors, and that'll be fun. But you just like a lot of green. How about that? And I don't want to critique other people's logos too much. Although I did that with our steering committee some yesterday. It's fun looking at logos. There's a lot of things we could do, right? This is worth pointing out because it's something that where do we take this? I use Grand Forks as just an example. You all are way more familiar with Grand Forks than I am. Look at their logo. Do you all know what that is? It's just a logo, by the way. But that's a piece of public art that every time anything happens in their community, guess where everyone's getting their selfies made? And guess what everyone's doing? They got their skating rink around it too. They've got like everything there. It's in the center of town, right? They happen to use it for the logo. But I actually want to focus on that as a piece of public art because that's branding. That is place branding. That's creating a sense of place. And that's perhaps, you saw it in the research. What's the most iconic thing? I don't know. You all didn't know. You couldn't come up with there is no iconic thing about West Fargo. And so my challenge, particularly to leadership, but it's everybody, right, is we just got to start telling our story now. There's nothing negative really we found other than an absence of identity at times. Creating a sense of place needs to be our focus next in storytelling, having public art that people are proud of and they want to get all their picture made. When we come to town, we're doing that, right? As an example. There's a lot of ways you can do that beyond just public art, infrastructure, roads, bridges, things like that, parking structures. If you didn't want to meet that might be a bad word or anything, I don't know. Some communities, you say the word parking structure, people lose their minds. Where do we go? We're right on time. Sweet. Number one, just overall takeaway. I told you this from the beginning. I'm just going to tell it to you again. West Fargo has been a city on the grow, no doubt about it. This has led to your identity, though. You are being a suburb. Many of you do not like that word. Sorry, you're a suburb. You've become a suburb. It's literally go look it up. The definition of a suburb is kind of like it's a growing city or neighborhood. It could be either one outside of a larger metro area. Congrats, right? But you all prove to us, hey, we're tired of that stuff. We like being separate. We don't want to be just an add-on to Fargo. Nothing against Fargo, but we're not that place. We're safer, we're cleaner, we're newer, we're younger. It's where all the cool new stuff happens. Let's be that way. We've just got to take the time to infuse that character into our personality of our community. That's really what we need to do. So, you've kind of created your identity, no doubt about it. Like I said, residents are proud. You enjoy your community. You're not big promoters. I don't know if it's because you feel like you don't have something to promote, the shiny stuff. Because when we talk about the tourism type things, like fun things to eat, things like that, most of you are still pointing people towards Fargo. Where your ratings in the research fell closer to average, to the threes, or around the fun, cool things that people brag about. That's where you slipped. Cool, that's a good blueprint for what we can do moving forward. Let's put more emphasis. And it's not going to start today. You've started this a couple years ago. The lights are a good example of that. The collection of all the merchants that get together with the Yards group, or the association that you all have created. I forgot the name of it, right? But all that's what that's doing, right? And just that's what it needs. You need to have a sense of place, a core where people gather. It gives you things to brag about there. All right. We do have a challenge with our name, by the way, right? When you look at standing out, we literally sound like a side of town of Fargo, right? And since none of you all created that, who did that? Who came up with that idea, right? Again, I promise you, we're not going to recommend changing your name again. You've already done this 4 times. But that Fargo's part of our name. It's going to be a challenge, but we can have some fun with it. They can't go one direction. Well, they can't go either direction, actually, right? So we can have some fun with our side of things, and I expect maybe we have some fun with West. We do need to put more efforts on bragging about itself. That's what this exercise is about. I just want to encourage you all. Bragging about your community is fun. Love where you live and tell everyone about it. And do it in the most unique, interesting way possible that no one else can confuse you with anyone else. That's what we're going to focus on. We're just going to teach ourselves to brag about ourselves. And we've got to create things. It's not like we're done. We have things to brag about. We need to do that. The one that sticks out to me is heritage. We need to do a better job of telling our story and preserving that stuff. We may not be a meatpacking town anymore, but it's important that people know about that heritage because it says something about the hardworking values of where we came from, right? And it does give us a sense of place. No one can take that away from us, right? We can only fail to tell that story. That's where we've got to put some attention, okay? Create a stronger sense of place, signage, infrastructure, public art. I talked about that. Cheyenne Street is a big opportunity. It's just an example of what I'm talking about, right? You've got north side and south side, and you've got one street that connects them both. Cheyenne Street can be a branded street in and of itself. It can be a destination from top to bottom, right? Depending on what you're looking for, whether it's downtown in the yards or the newer development with the lights and everything in between. Cruise-in occurs on Cheyenne Street as well, correct? Yeah, so you've got some marquee events that you utilize that. So Cheyenne Street can be your, I don't want to use Bourbon Street as a silly example, not relevant, but it can be a branded street. You get what I'm saying? Like the whole thing. Go to West Fargo, you're going to go to Cheyenne Street. That's a big opportunity. And everything along the way, I think, can harness the character of your community. So what do we need to do? This isn't a tagline. It's just a direction as I wrap up. We need to be interesting in everything that we do, in all things. Celebrate your interesting history. Show off your interesting people. Encourage interesting in your art. Encourage interesting in your entrepreneurism. You encourage interesting in your schools already, by the way. Create interesting places. We are proud of where we live. It's evident in the research. We need to do a better job of bragging about ourselves and telling our story and getting it out there. That's really where we need to go. And we just need to do that in an interesting, rather than just it's a cool, neat, nice, great place to live, work, and play. Because it is, but that's not interesting, right? We got to do that in an interesting, remarkable way. So that's where we're going to go. And the next steps of this project, just so you know, is actually what most people think of when they think of branding is, what does it look like? What do we look like? How do we talk about ourselves? This should whet your appetite of where we're going to go. I hope, right? It's going to reflect the character of this community, the small town values, all that stuff that's really important, right? How do we do that even as we continue to move forward? Because we're going to move forward, right? So let's tell our heritage a little bit. Let's talk about our way in a way that's very interesting, and starts to brag about ourselves. So what that means, we've got communication concepts, of course, logo and colors and fonts and all the things that go with branding. That's what's going to follow over the next 4 to 6 weeks, probably. And I look forward. I will be back, I believe, probably, we haven't inked it on the calendar yet, but probably around March, sometime in March, I'll be back kind of showing up where that all landed and how do we go about that and what does it look like moving forward. So that is the research and hopefully a good idea of where we're headed. And I appreciate your all's time today. Voila. Right on time.